Thank you so much for being here. If you're here for Aaron and you have no idea who I am, I'm Kim. I am the director and the program founder for Goodness Village, which is the tiny home community that is right over there on Crosswinds land. There's lots of people that like to take credit for Goodness Village being here, and I would love to spend the time telling you all of those people. But I will say that this guy right here is a major player in that piece of having Goodness Village here, and set a lot of foundational education within the church and with the pastors and with the congregation of what homelessness is, and really normalized the experience for, I think, our unsheltered neighbors, and made it a conversation that people could ask questions and not feel judged and not be embarrassed about the not knowing about what that experience is like. So I just want to thank him so much for creating a space that in the Tri-Valley we have homes for our unsheltered neighbors that I don't think would have happened without you.
Thank you for saying that.
So if you were here in December, we had a talk with my friend Kevin Adler, who wrote a really cool book that I was just lost for what the title was earlier, so thank you. It was called When We Walk By. It's a super good book. I encourage you to read it, learn from his experience working with the unsheltered population. But while we were in our talk, in that moment, I was thinking to myself, wow, this would be really cool if we could continue this experience of bringing folks who want to learn more about our unsheltered neighbors and just learn in general on how to be a good neighbor in this community that we all live in, because there's so much anger and hate and anxiety and hurt amongst our neighborhoods. And so as I was having that thought and trying to have a conversation with Kevin, you were sitting there, and I thought, this is the man to come in and have this talk. And then empathy, because whenever we get together, you and I seem to immediately go into what is empathy and how do we be empathetic to our neighbors and how do we show up. And so that, I'm so glad you said yes, and I'm so glad you are all here. And what I've also noticed, I'm going to get off of this and let you talk for a minute, but I'm just going to let Aaron also go rogue tonight, so I'm going to hold the mic for a minute. But one thing that I've been talking about a lot lately whenever I'm speaking is the people who need to be in the room are never in the room. So likely most of you already are empathetic individuals and know how to build empathy and interact with others. But I'm hoping tonight you're here so that you can help educate those that are in your network on how they might be able to build empathy amongst themselves. So again, thank you for being in the room for that. So you want to take a minute to introduce yourself.
Definitely, thank you so much. Shout out to Kim for making this whole thing happen, huh? I mean, like, not just tonight, but this village. You know, my wife and I and our 3 children, we used to live here on this property, and the village was built around our house. So we were some of the first villagers, you know. You were here way before the village. We lived in the house that Daniel and Kim rebuilt for our benefit. Thank you so much. That was huge. But just to talk a little bit about myself. So I think one of the things that you know, and we're talking about the unsheltered population, and just so you know that I have some experience working with other populations as well. Before I worked with the unhoused population, my wife and I actually helped to run an organization that works specifically with youth and young adults that were dealing with systems involvement. So we served youth on probation, we served youth that were in the foster care system, and we served youth that were young parents, so like under the age of 19. We ourselves were parents under the age of 19. So we've served that population. When I came here to Crosswinds, I actually got connected with some organizations here locally, City Serve. You guys know City Serve. I worked there for a little bit doing homeless outreach, and then connected and landed at First Pres Hayward. And over there, we operate 2 homeless shelters. So we have a 50-bed shelter and a 21-bed shelter, one in Castro Valley and one in Hayward. We also have daytime resource centers at both sites. And then we have a food pantry at one of those sites that serves about 700 families a week through the food pantry operation. We have 6 tiny homes. If you have been here any amount of time, those were the tiny homes that were built in the parking lot here at Crosswinds. Those 6 tiny homes, if you remember that very first project, those were picked up with a forklift and then driven to our site at First Pres Hayward. And they're put there, and we've been operating a transitional housing program for people that are unhoused, where people can stay there up to 18 months, and been doing that since 2021. So, I'm sorry, 2020, excuse me. So we basically operate all of those different programs serving the unhoused population, and we work with a lot of local providers to be able to support folks. So that's a little bit about like what I do. Who I am, I'll say, is I'm a man that's in recovery. So I've got 6 years of sobriety. I work with a sponsor. I go to meetings. I attend therapy. I have mentors. I'm a father of 3 children. I got 3 children that are all adults, 24, 21, and 19. So super excited about having adult children. If anybody else has those in the room, that's a whole different world. I'm into that. But really, I think the heart for me is, I think we've struggled in this world where we think like nonprofit is doing something and faith-based is like caring about people, and then like corporate is achievement. And I kind of sit in the middle of some of those worlds. So I get to work together with faith-based communities. I get to work with nonprofits. I operate the nonprofit arm of First Pres Hayward, and work with government grants and a faith-based community in a way that is compliant. So that's a lot around like who I am and what I do.
Awesome. Any questions for, just kidding.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that what he just said that maybe you didn't pick up on, but he is a father of 3, and they started, him and his wife, before 19, and they are still together. So can we applaud that moment? And I think that emphasizes the way you work with people, the way you're able to not be judgmental, and that you can share space, and you're willing to learn from others. Because as you know, wives, we got to teach sometimes. So
and the amazingness of my wife of 25 years, Kathy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but it's huge, right? In this society, marriages don't usually last that long, and that takes a lot of work, and I just wanted to point that out. So diving right in, one of the things that we usually talk about together when we get together is there's this saying out there that we hear asked a lot from people is, what do you do with the people who don't want help? And I know that both of us get a little with that statement. And so I thought maybe we could start there just to lay the foundation around what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, that is a question I hear very, very, very often. What do you do when people say they don't want help, or they're not getting the help? The help is there, they're not taking it. There's an author named Kevin Nye. And if you want stickers, I have stickers up here. They say Jesus would carry Narcan. So that's just like a whole situation. If you'd like one of those, I'd like to offer those free of charge. I would like those to be circulated. But the author Kevin Nye, actually, he printed those. And he kind of coined that term. And he brings up this topic. He wrote a book called Grace Can Lead Us Home. And it really talks about a lot of the challenges that we have in the church world around being able to empathize and sympathize and connect with people that are struggling more than us. And which is interesting because a lot of faith communities are built around serving people, but then there's this gap, right? And I think nonprofit world, we see the same thing. In the community, if it's in your neighborhood, you're like, hey, I want to give this person this apple, and they said no. There's this shelter right up the street, and they don't want to go there. There's social services, they could get there, and they don't want to go there. They said no, they don't want to do the thing. And I'll say from meeting, and I literally have met thousands of people in this world. Like I mean specifically youth and young adults. My wife and I, with our organization, were able to help over 1,000 young people to get jobs in the 10 years that we did that work. Here, I've met hundreds just in the Tri-Valley, and we serve right around 3,000 unhoused individuals a year out there in the Hayward area, between all of the different things that we do. So, I mean, I've met thousands of people. And I'll tell you, I've never met anybody who didn't really want a thing, even though they present that they don't want it. What they're saying, and this is, Kevin and I brought this up, and I was trying to put words to it, and he really helped me with it, is they don't want that opportunity right now from you. And this is the challenge, that a lot of times these opportunities are presented, and I've done a lot of outreach with the law enforcement. I just did the point in time count last month. We went out into the creeks and the encampments, and we went up, and there was a woman who the police were like, hey, this guy right here can help you if you want anything. And there were 7 police officers and then me, right? And it was raining, so I'm like standing in this bright vest, and she's like, I don't want no help from Caltrans, right? I did look like Caltrans, but I was cold, y'all. I'm sorry, I was trying to stay dry. But after I went up to her and I was like asking her these questions, you're supposed to ask this survey, and it got really, really personal. I was uncomfortable asking the questions. I'm like, you can say I don't want to answer to all of these. And it got to the point where she's like, don't answer, don't. I'm like, me neither, like I wouldn't answer this. Asking very deep personal things, right, that are none of my business. But I got to the end of it and I walked away, and I was by myself, and she had declined all services. And then the police just happened to be walking in front of me, and she goes, hey, come here. And I went back over there, and she's like, hey, I got a real sore throat. Do you think you can connect me with a doctor? I'm like, I got you right now. And I called my case manager. This was literally like a quarter mile from our site. I literally had a doctor on site. The medical van was there that day. I'm like, hey, can we get her an appointment with the doctor? Can we do this thing? Can we do that thing? Da, 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 da. And we set it all up, and she didn't go. I was like, oh, well, maybe she's okay. Not 3 days later, I'm driving into the parking lot. She's standing out front with 2 guys that use our services. I've been using them for years. They're standing in a little triad. It's raining. She's wearing like a little baby tee and like pajama shorts. She's not wearing the proper attire, no shoes, right? So I'm talking to her, I was like, hey, have you been able to go in the shelter? We're standing in front of the shelter. Like we're on the property in front of the shelter. I'm like, hey, have you been able to go in? She goes, not yet. And the 2 guys next to her are like, hey, you should go in. It's legit. You can go in there. Go right now. They'll take care of you. Just go in right now. You said you need this, da, 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 da. It didn't matter what I said. What mattered is the people that have influence in her life, what they said. She's listening to them, not me. But now if I see her again and I recognize her and I have a conversation with her, she's beginning to get trust because she knows the people she trusts trust me. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's what I'm finding is that it's people saying, I don't want the opportunity from you right now, and that opportunity might not be right for me, right? Many times I'll say, I was out here in Livermore, and I got several people housed in the city of Oakland. And out of that, people refused to go to Oakland. And I was like, come on, it's a house. You're literally sleeping in the creek outside of Lowe's. And they're like, no, I'm not going there. And come to find out, dig deeper, their whole family is here. They're born and raised here in this city. I'm telling them you have to move cities and be away from your support structure to go live on a 3rd floor apartment with nothing, like no furniture, no food. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I'll tell you, I'm really concerned about where me and my family live, So I'll just say, like, we a lot of these opportunities don't meet the needs of an individual, right? And also, the last thing I'll say around just like the no piece is people have been rejected so many times. You guys have no idea. Just yesterday, I started a church in one of the shelters with actually our family right here. Raise your hand. This is the Stack Life crew right here. Eileen, Jessica, and Kathy, we're the co-leaders of Stack Life, which is a faith community built out of the shelter when the shelter is closed in South Hayward. And we had a guy that's been on the streets for 7 years. This guy's a senior. He does all of our farming. He's raised thousands of pounds of food on our property in this farm that he created. It's like a super garden. And he got all of his starts here from the Eden Project. They gave him the little starts. Cool. He just let us know. He's like, hey, after 7 years, I finally got matched to an apartment. I'm going to be moving into housing. We're like, oh my goodness, what's going on? He's like, well, the thing is that they said they were trying to send me to Oakland. They were trying to send me to Newark. They're trying to send me to Fremont. I finally got this one. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it's none of those cities. Right? He said that yesterday, right? Like Jessica's like, no, he said that. He's like, I'm not going to tell you where it is. It's private. And then he talks like that. But I do it to his face, so it's okay. But it's like it's got to be the opportunity that's right for the individual, right? And again, even with that, like he's been trying for years. He's filled out with us dozens of applications, not 12 applications, but like 30, 40 applications with us. He didn't reject it. We have to keep convincing him. And he retired from the Hayward Area Recreation District. He has a pension. He had a decent life, and he ended up on the streets for 7 years. And he's in his late 60s. And I mean, he got rejected so many times. So we're like, hey, fill out this one more application. I mean, how many applications do you fill out before you just give up on it? Mm-hmm. And if you didn't want people to talk to you anymore and you were tired of filling applications, what would you tell them? I don't want it. Right? I wanted to bring up a little bit. I wrote some notes here to hopefully not to go totally rogue, but
rogue is good here.
Yeah, we're going rogue. This one, I don't know your faith community, but this was a study done on Christians and poverty. Kevin Nye, the guy I was talking about, he cited a recent poll that showed that Christians are more than twice as likely as non-Christians to associate poverty with a lack of effort, as opposed to difficult circumstances. Again, not the people in this room, right? But the folks who wouldn't be able to come here because empathy you would have to not believe that. You would have to believe that there are external circumstances. And I'll tell you, every single conversation I've had, there's something that has impacted that individual. It may not just only be budget, but it may be trauma that they've endured, pain that they've gone through, unhealed loss that they've been through, deficiencies that have been undiagnosed. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we see as causes of this. This focus of individual failure versus systemic pressure implies that people experiencing homelessness deserve their plight, and that Christians are morally justified in letting them face the consequences of their own failure. This is a study that was just done. I'll just say, to me, that's a root challenge. So when we're talking about empathy, we have to suspend our judgment, right? Because I think there's this whole thing that I have been guilty of, and I'm still guilty of to today. I'm talking about empathy, and I struggle with empathy, right? Because I put myself on the judge's seat when anybody thinks differently than me, right? Am I the only one? I don't know, maybe, okay. That's a tough one to admit, but I'm sitting in front of you doing it because that's part of the practice, right? If at first we can admit that we're judging, right? We have this belief that this person did this thing, right? I'll say, I don't, how graphic do we want to get?
Raise your hand if you're okay with graphic. Okay, sounds like we're good.
Okay, so I have a young man in our shelter right now. This is an African-American male. He's in his 20s, and he's extremely violent speaking. He's never gotten into a violent altercation, but he screams and yells very vulgar terms on a regular basis to no particular person. Right? You're like, okay, that's not good in a room with 50 people, right? And especially other people that have been dealing with other things. Well, recently, in the middle of the night, he seems to be sleepwalking, and he says, "Don't touch me there. Don't touch my booty. Get out of my pants." And he's by himself. Who's to blame for this situation? Mm-hmm. Not him. So what does he need? Does he need us to sit on the judge's seat? Is that going to solve it? Actually, he needs just love. And I'll tell you, and I struggle with it because he's waking other people up. And that's my responsibility is the 50 people in that room. We have a shelter manager, and I learn from her every day, Miss Alma. Her name is Alma Flores. In Spanish, that means soul flower. And that's who she is. She's a soul flower. Y'all know Alma. You guys have volunteered in the shelter. Yeah. See, you know I'm not lying. Alma, she goes, "Oh, hello, my friend. Can I get you some tea?" And she'll get him a hot cup of tea and bring him into the office and just let him have a moment. And as soon as he gets the tea, he stops screaming. He's now conscious. He's brought back to the moment. And when you drink warm tea, you get sleepy, right? My guy passes out. The real solution is not kicking him out, because the alternative is we just kick him out of the shelter. Then he's on the street with the same delusions. Now he's louder. Now he doesn't have warm tea. Now he doesn't have a place to sleep. And now he's in your front yard. Right? It's so the solution, I think, is for us to get up closer, right? And that comes from inside of us. We got to change this belief that people have earned their plight. And I don't know your religious beliefs, but if that's what you believe on your religion, I'll tell you, as a pastor, that's a misinterpretation of the original teachings. That's not what it's saying. Can I put a couple more myths out there?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there was a recent study done, and this might be helpful for you that are talking to other people that weren't able to make it today. There was a study done by UCSF, and it was the largest study done for homelessness in California. So you guys might want to look that up. You can look up the UCSF study. And there's a couple of facts. Number one, California is home to more than 171,000 people experiencing homelessness daily. There's just over 300,000 people experiencing homelessness in the United States. So we have more than 50% of the population of the unhoused in the country, in this state. Everybody's like, wait, everybody's flocking here because we're nice to homeless. I'm telling you, I literally hear that all the time. We should kick them out. We should force them to go somewhere else. We should, There's a lot of we shoulds. Fact, this will blow your mind. 89%, that's 90%, if you round up, 90% of all of California's unsheltered population lost their last housing in California. But wait, I thought people were flocking to places with good weather. Does anybody know the top 3 states for homelessness in the United States? California, we're number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, Florida. Makes sense, it's weather. Number 3, New York. Yeah, exactly. Everybody's like, wait, I don't get it. Wait, they don't have good weather. Wait. Got to challenge our beliefs, right? Yep. There's assumptions that we've made. And I think this floored me, but I'll tell you, in my shelters, 86% of the folks in my shelter are from this county. Not just this state. 86% of the people that I serve, over 1,000 a year, are from this county. That'll get you. Fact number 3, 19% of our siblings that are unhoused entered homelessness from prolonged jail and prison stays, where few reported having received services prior to having exited. So 19%, about 20%. How many of us thought it was way higher than that? I did. And I work with the population. She worked in the population. We probably thought it was higher than that. Mm-hmm. It's only 20%. Fact number 4, those whose names were named on leases prior to entering homelessness reported a median of 10 days notice of eviction, where those who were not named on leases reported a median of 1 day's notice. Just let that sit real quick. All the things we thought were true when we came in here have all been shook, right? There's a lot of beliefs, mm-hmm. assumptions that we have. And that's the part, I think empathy requires us to pause those. We have to get curious, right? That's the thing, we've got to get curious. We've got to ask ourselves, what are the things I'm assuming? And with those things that I'm assuming, what are my actions out of that? And if I can pause those assumptions, then I can move forward in my empathy.
Look, can I?
Yes.
I didn't know how low we were going to go. And we're going to pause.
I can keep going real.
No, I know you can. I know. One thing that I want to point out that you might not have caught as you were listening to those is that Aaron referred to our neighbors, our unsheltered neighbors, as his sibling in that stat. If you didn't catch it, he said our sibling. And one thing that he says a lot when I've been talking with him is your mantra, the kinship over pity. And I think that those go together, that sibling that you just automatically said that and see them as your brother or your sister, and recognizing that kinship over pity. And I really want you to spend some time kind of explaining that philosophy and how you got there and what that really means to your soul.
Yeah, this is actually, I've had a pretty big turning point in my life around this. When I first started, I won't cuss, but there's cuss words in this story, okay? When I first started the work I did with youth that were system involved, we mainly started with probation and foster youth. And it was a majority young folks involved in probation. And I used to start stories, and I would say, it's so funny. I'm actually really sad that I'm gonna say this out loud, but this is who I used to be, okay? I would start stories and I would tell these kids, because this was in the neighborhood I grew up in. right? So I was like literally raised across the street from this place where we were dealing with this, which is a heavily gang impacted area. And I felt the need to qualify that. So I would tell kids, these youngsters, with all of my experience, I'm not the average white dude. Like, I'm from up the street. I was over here, I did all this kind of stuff. And this kid who happened to be a norteño, he's like, bro, why do you keep saying that? And I was like, first of all, no cussing in the workshop. Second of all, I'm just introducing myself. And he's like, either teach us or don't. You don't need to talk about yourself. Well, we're about to take a break. I was done at that moment because he literally was accurate. He's like, you don't have to talk about yourself. Just say the thing you're going to say. We're just people having a conversation. If you have to qualify yourself to me, then maybe you shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. This kid was like 14, heavily gang involved. Education, he really struggled, had a learning difference. He was way below his grade level, but way above his age and maturity. And I needed to sit at his feet and listen. And I've changed that. And I learned, actually, Father Greg Boyle, I don't know if you all have heard of Father Greg Boyle at Homeboy Industries in LA. It's another author I would highly recommend. This book is called Tattoos on the Heart. I'm going to read from it if I can. Yeah. This was pivotal for me in learning a little bit about kinship. In his chapter on kinship, which is it's a big thing about his philosophy. He says, Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills in this way. We've just forgotten that we belong to each other. Yeah, let that sink, right? Kinship is what happens to us when we refuse to let that happen. With kinship as the goal, other essential things fall into place. Without it, no justice, no peace. I suspect that were kinship our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice. We'd just be celebrating it. Yeah, kinship. If the goal is kinship, we act different. We respond different. We connect different. It's the opposite of othering. And then this other little quote, I'll put right here. This quote is called, "No daylight to separate us. Only kinship, inching ourselves closer to creating a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. Soon we imagine, with God, this circle of compassion. Then we imagine no one standing outside of that circle, moving ourselves closer to the margins so that the margins themselves will be erased. We stand there with those whose dignity has been denied. We locate ourselves with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. At the edges, we join the easily despised and the readily left out." And this sentence right here is the sentence that actually changed me. We stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. We situate ourselves right next to the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. Kinship over pity, in Bible language the Bible says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Kinship is the moment when we look at somebody and we see a reflection of ourselves rather than an other. Graphic note, we went to Austin, Texas together. Kim and I were there together back in the beginning. I was able to go back and go to a leadership training, and then I just went back in September and went to a second level training. And I got to meet the guy who started Community First Village. Did I say Goodness Village or Community First? I meant Community First. That's what I meant.
I heard Community First.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. I constantly get the names mixed up. I'm not going to lie to you. But I went to Community First Village and I pulled him off to the side because he had just done this talk and he's just walking off. And I was like, wait a second, the way you talk about people and how you see people, I need to do that. I need to see people the way you see them. And he said, this is a quote from him. He says, if you see a woman who actually has semen on her clothing because she just sold her body, and you see a man that has a needle hanging out of his arm who just overdosed, and you can see your higher power in that moment, then you're ready. And then he walked out. And I was like, whoa, I got questions. Hold on. And that sounds very graphic. And sounds very difficult, but if you can really dig to find, and not to say that God created those moments, but that person is created in the image of their creator, whoever your belief system is. And if we can see God in each other, if we can see ourselves, our own reflection, like if I was to have those circumstances, I would probably make those choices. I've had to teach myself that. And it takes me out of the judge's seat. And it's like if there's a problem with us and somebody else and we're sitting across the table, the problem is the other person. However, if we look at it like this, and we're like, that's the problem. The problem is you yelling at night, right? You're waking up other people. The problem is not that you're traumatized. That's not the problem. And the problem isn't you. The problem is this thing that's bothering you. And literally, I had a staff member. This is what the guy said to this. We had a different guy who dealt with schizophrenia. And there was two guys at one time. It was a little bit funny because they were both having an argument with their own selves, but they were triggering each other. I don't know if y'all ever been in this moment. Like I'm looking at the staff right here. Y'all ever had that? It's almost a little bit like, wait, whoa, wait a second. And I went up to, and I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, someone in the middle of a schizophrenic moment, they're screaming, da 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 da, and you're like, hey, Kim, how you doing? They're like, oh, I'm good. How are you? You're like, whoa, like that was, it just like comes right back. It's just like that. It's the wildest thing. And then they'll go back again. And this staff member who was like not trained at all went up to the guy and was like, hey man, are the voices bothering you? He's like, yeah, man, they won't leave me alone. He gave a bunch of extra words. And the staff member goes, why don't you tell them to go see you outside? And he looked and he goes, come see me outside then. And he stopped talking to himself for the whole day. It was the wildest thing. It was a moment of just like this guy just literally had a tool to deal with the problem. Rather than saying, hey, you need to be quiet. If I was to yell at him, I'm just going to trigger him more. He's going to go deeper into it. Being treated improperly is what caused that. Not the human as a whole. What caused it is the thing that he's been through. Another book, I know I'll reference a lot of books. Oprah wrote a book with a psychiatrist. It's called What Happened to You? And it changes the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And I'll tell you, it's written as a conversation, one of the best audiobooks. I don't know if you listen to audiobooks, but they're just talking back and forth. And they go through some things at a very, very high level. But it's just a conversation. And it reframes us from saying, hey, what's wrong with you? To saying, hey, what happened to you? What have you been through? What has caused this situation? And then when we get there, then like healing is possible. We're never going to solve this problem with just houses. And we need more houses, don't get me wrong, especially in California. The root of that study found that most issues that cause homelessness were financial. That's really the reason. We have people that are dealing with schizophrenia, people that are dealing with drug use, people that are dealing with poor decisions, people that are dealing with all of these issues in houses in this county at a higher rate than we do outside of houses. Would y'all agree? There's more drug users in houses.
Back it up and say it again.
Okay. There are more people using drugs in houses in Alameda County than people that are unhoused that are using drugs. Y'all get that? Okay. That is an actual fact, right? So let's get away from that thought process. This most recent survey, I think it said something around 30%, 36% mentioned that they do have a substance use disorder. That's only 1 out of 3. I know a lot of people say, when I was here, the question that was asked to me all the time is, are people homeless because they use drugs, or they use drugs because they're homeless? I mean, I sat with that question a lot. I'm like, I don't know what to say because I'm doing this. I don't know. So I started asking people, what should I say when people ask me this? Right? Because you don't go, what's wrong with you? That's not in case you're trying to connect with people, that's not how to do it. Come to find out, I was wrong. Not everybody was using. You know, one of the crazy things we just started, we have a chiropractic school, and they come every week to both of our sites now and do free chiropractic care in the shelter. You know what's happened? The behavior has improved in our shelters because people were hurting. They're not hurting. And if you're not hurting, then you treat other people better. In my recovery, they say what halts your recovery, HALT, is when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Does that affect anybody else here in your behavior? Okay. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It halts our recovery, right? It halts our recovery. And we can recover. We do recover, but we need to have, if you've ever looked at Maslow's hierarchy needs, you have to have food, air, water, soil. If you don't have those things, then you can't start to think about security. You can't think about safety. You can't think about development and providing for yourself. And then you can't think ultimately about solving something. And like for me, one of the huge markers that I'll say, like in this kinship over pity situation, like when we do for people what they can do for themselves, we harm them. But if we don't do for people what they're not able to do, we also harm them. So we have to be able to treat people with the solution that solves their problem. And I say, I'll go back to this, like, what does each one of us want in our lives? I mean, I've talked to many people about this and I've asked this question. Most of us just want to be accepted by our parents, authority figures, lawmakers, our bosses, people in our lives that we respect. We want that acceptance, right? That's what everybody wants from you. And like kinship is ultimately saying, no matter what happens, right? If we were blood family with every single person, they could still act the fool and we would still just love them. We may not like them in this moment, and that's okay, but that's not what kinship is. It's not about liking people. It's about being connected to people. We are siblings. And if we can get to that point, like that's where things start to change. That's where things start to change. And we can start to connect with anybody if we treat them with just acceptance. It's like, okay, got you, I hear you. What's next? What is it you need in this moment? Is that on topic? I just want to make sure I'm still on topic.
You're still on topic. You guys tracking with him? Okay.
Everybody good with it? I will say the big thing, as like a bottom line for this is like removing shame, judgment, preconceived notions, ego, assumptions. Like that's the come to the table for empathy. For me personally, I'll just, y'all want more book recommendations? I keep going. Okay. If you're just getting into trauma work, there's a book called Trauma Stewardship. I would highly recommend that. It talks about how to care for yourself if you're caring for people involved in trauma. It has a whole toolkit. Chapter 4, you'll get stuck. I've tried to read this with all of my leads, all my managers. We literally spent like 4 months on chapter 4. I was like, okay, we just have to move on. Y'all just need to work on chapter 4 or no. It's a list of like 16 trauma healing practices. It's wild. But that'll give you like a baseline. If you're ready to go deeper, if you're understanding trauma and you're ready to really start digging in yourself, there's a book called How to Do the Work. And it's Dr. Nicole LaPera, I believe. And she really goes through it and says, hey, like there's this whole idea of like we all have like inner wounds, right? If you could call that your inner child, I'm not going to get too foo-foo on this, but if you could call that your inner child has a wound, every time you protect that child, and we protect it by fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, those are us protecting that, right? So if anybody, you don't have to raise your hand, but think about, are you an avoider? Who runs? Think about that. Are you a fighter, right? Do you just disappear? Do you withdraw? You stop answering questions? You ever do this, right? That's fawning, right? Or that's freeze. And then fawning is like you're caring for the person who's abusing you. Anybody ever seen that? Everyone's like, well, they keep going back to him. That's literally survival. It's called survival, y'all. We can't judge those things. But that's our ego protecting this wound. And really, for us to connect to people, you got to do that work. You have to do it. I have to do my own work. I just had 2 major realizations. I share it with my squad over here. I had 2 major realizations in the last 3 weeks. And having those 2 major realizations have allowed me to be in rooms where I would have been defensive with the same people that have offended me, people that I get angry, and I'm an anger person. So I'll lash out, why are you treating me like this? Why are they doing that? Da, 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 da. Recovering people pleaser, it's part of it. But I'll get angry, and I've been in these rooms where I'm not angry anymore. I can just sit there and just take it. I can just realize, oh, I've got more margin to show up for this person because I've healed this thing that I was protecting. Are y'all still with me? So I'll say like empathy starts with me. Like I have to empathize with myself and say, hey, I got to forgive 19-year-old Aaron. And then I got to go back and I got to forgive 11-year-old Aaron because there's some stuff I was blaming him for. And got to heal 6-year-old Aaron. I got to forgive him. I have to have empathy with him. If I can do that, then I can show up for other people. And then my ego doesn't have to protect me. I could just sit there with somebody. We have a woman right now who's extremely delusional. I mean, I can tell unflattering stories about her, but believe me, she's extremely delusional. And the solution was for me, and I was sitting in the meeting and I'm like, I'm ready. I know this is gonna be wild. She's a screamer. She's like, you're not gonna get me wrong. You're not gonna, she's actually filed a lawsuit. Oh, I don't need to talk too much details. For loss, for something that she threw in the trash right in front of us. I mean, she believes that it was taken from her, and she admits that she threw it in the trash. I don't know. You know what I mean? We settled out of court for a Lowe's gift card. But anyways, real talk. But in these conversations, what we were able to do is we were able to direct her to say, hey, you can only email me and this other person, Miss Alma, the one with the hot tea. We're the only two that she can email. She can no longer email other staff, other people outside agencies. If she does that, there'll be a consequence. And we've held with that. And if that happens, then the consequence will be issued. And she understood it. She agreed to it. And she's been emailing me every morning at 5 a.m. Somehow she got my cell phone number. She only likes to communicate between 5 and 5:20 a.m. I don't know what it is. But I just hear what she's saying. I hear what she's saying. I hear what she's saying. I'll respond every once in a while, and I just show up. But because I've been able to heal some of the things inside of me, I don't have to take that personally. She's not mad at me. She's struggling with the fact that she has to sleep on the floor in a gym with 49 people, and most of them are men, and it is dangerous. And she is destined for more than that. And she does deserve more than that. And that's what we have right now today. And we're working on helping her get to the next level. But I can hear past the anger to just say, hey, is there a real complaint in here? Is there an actual thing that happened? If not, just, hey, thanks for telling me. Thank you. And it doesn't have to go anywhere. I don't have to get angry with it. I don't have to protect myself because I'm healed to a point that I don't have to be offended by somebody that is not well. Fear is what separates us. I would just say that as a nugget. I think us being afraid of people is fear. I'll talk a little bit about addiction. I know we're like kind of running. I want to make sure we get through a couple more topics, yeah. But if we no longer are afraid of people, right? So we can heal ourselves to a point to where we can hear stuff. And if you would like to talk about healing, there happens to be a licensed clinical social worker sitting right here, and it's not me. They could talk to you about trauma healing. And you see her nodding. She's a professional in this, and I'm just brand new to this work. And she's like, yeah, that works, right? She's like, I think I told you about that 7 years ago, Aaron. I'm like, I know, it just takes time, okay? Like, I'm working on it, okay? But if we can get to the point where we don't fear people, we're not afraid of people, we can connect with people. I'll tell you, there's been very, very, very few times that I've actually been afraid. And I've been working in creeks. I've been working around people that have weapons. I've been working around people that are currently under the influence, people that are currently having medical issues. I've been inside of jails, and I've only been scared really like 2 times. And one of them was I came out of a door in the shelter, and this woman, she screams a lot, and it was dark, and she happened to be standing out there, and she screamed, and I screamed. And then it was like a whole situation. I was actually afraid in that moment. She was not screaming at me. She was screaming at her voices. That actually scared me. But situations with weapons, situations like those things, I'm not actually I'm not the subject that they're going after. I know nonprofit directors. I know one particular that has been mugged 9 separate times. And they're a very strict and rigid ruler. And I worked in the same place, and I've been with the same people, and I've never been threatened personally like that. So I'll just say, there's people that could cause violent acts to other individuals, could be situations. I just have never been in one of those. I've never been swung on. I have had a bicycle thrown at me, but it's the slowest thing I've ever had thrown at me. And he was really angry, and I knew it was coming. He grabbed it with both hands, and it really didn't leave the ground. It was slid at him.
I want to piggyback on that because I think that sometimes people may see Aaron and they're like, yeah, you're a huge dude. Like, why would you be afraid of somebody? And I've been in this field for 20 years, and I've worked in locked institutions for severely mentally ill. I've done street outreach. I've worked inside Santa Rita with the hardest to serve and lockdown. And I've also never had that experience too. To the fear of my husband of me going, hey, let me tell you this funny story that happened yesterday. It was, I lived, and he doesn't find those stories funny, but in hindsight, they may have been unsafe situations for people who aren't in our field and don't have the respect and the dignity that we provide to individuals. And if you hear the language that Aaron has used the entire night, it has been so equalizing, so full of respect, understanding that it's not about you, and that it really is about, this is a human being that is experiencing something, and that maybe I can help them in this moment. And if not, then maybe it's better that I just walk away. But it's not that it's about me, that they don't, I'm not going to take it personally and make a big deal and make it so that they won't seek help from somebody else or cause harm. And so I just want to say in that space that I think as long as you are respectful and come from a genuine place, they still might not want what you're offering, but you're not in a place of danger because they can still see that you came from a space of wanting to help. They're just not ready for it from you at that time.
Yeah, with that opportunity. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for saying that. There's two more things I'll just say on this piece. One, and there's an author named Johann Hari, Hari, and he wrote a book. He does a lot of research on heavy drugs. And if that's something that you're interested in, if you'd like to learn about that, he's got a whole bunch of statistics that would be very, very helpful if you're interested in that at all. He wrote a book called Chasing the Scream. And in that book, he coined this term. And I'll tell you, for those of us in recovery, first of all, I believe that everybody is addicted to something. I'll just say that. It may not be a substance. It may be a behavior. It may be control. It may be anger. It may be running. It may be hiding. It may be fawning. It may be fighting. I heard one guy say one time that anything that we turn to when we feel uncomfortable for relief is your addiction. So whatever just popped into your mind, each one of you had something. Take that home and think about that. Johann Hari coined this term. He says the opposite of addiction is not abstinence. The opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of addiction is connection. Wow. And as a recovering addict, I'll tell you that's true. Because when I feel uncomfortable, what halts, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or I get restless, irritable, and discontent, which rids me of my sobriety, restless, irritable, discontent, those things, they come from a lack of connection to other people. And what we really, really deeply crave is intimacy. And intimacy never comes from a pity relationship. To go back to the original question, kinship over pity. If I pity somebody, I hand them a thing, I throw a thing at them, and they should be grateful to me, right? That's a pity dynamic. A dignified thing is, hey, what would support you right now? What is it that you need right now today? Kevin Adler gave out socks in December. Yeah. He had an abundance of socks. I took those socks. I went to my church on Sunday, that next Sunday, and I quoted him, and I was like, this guy, he's got it. I've never had anybody in thousands of interactions. I think I might have had one person, just because they got a pair already that day, say no to a pair of socks that's on the street. That's the number one thing you need is socks. and drawers. So if you carry clean drawers, gently used socks are okay, but clean drawers. And I'm looking at folks right there laughing because they know exactly what we're talking about. He said, give a pair of socks to somebody and start a conversation. We went back. So just yesterday in church, this guy walks up to me and he's an elderly gentleman. And he's talking to me and he says, you told us to give out socks. And then he just choked up. And I was like, uh-oh. What happened? I was like, no, he had a bad experience because, this guy sometimes tells me about how loud the music is in the church. You know what I'm talking about. He said he took 3 pairs and he gave out all 3 of those. And he said they were life-changing experiences for him each time he gave them out. Can I have more socks? As he's tearing, and then he walks away. He's like, I got nothing else to say. It's connection. It's dignified. It's saying, hey, would you like a pair of socks? How you doing today? I got a pair of socks. Do you want it? Not throwing a pair of socks on the ground, right? It's getting the thing for somebody else that you would want to get for yourself, right? It's the nice pastry from the farmer's market for the lady sleeping outside of the farmer's market, right? And a cup and a glass of water, right? The opposite of addiction is not abstinence, it's connection.
So how do we address this, right? Because not so long ago, 30 years ago, it was the war on drugs and the tough love and remove yourself emotionally from your family members and they'll come back to you sober if you do that. So we have to change the way that we have taught or have been taught to think about drugs and about the people that use them, and how would you address somebody that asks that?
Great question. I would say, first of all, most folks that are users are involved in codependent relationships. So that's the number one right off the top. You're going to find that in a family with heavy users, there tends to be heavy codependency amongst everyone. There's a group called CODA, Codependents Anonymous. There's Al-Anon, which is specifically for family members of addicts. Both of those really support people that are involved in codependency. I would say, go back to that part where I said I can show up for other people if I do my work. About 7 years ago, I was standing actually here on this deck and I was complaining to a woman who leads a whole group of women of color that are pastors, and she does this whole thing. And I was saying, I've got all these problems. And she responded, she goes, Aaron, sounds like you might need to do some shadow work. It's like, what does that even mean? And basically what she was saying is this anger was coming from a place where I was insecure. So I'm trying to fix my insecurity by other people that really, they don't have it in them. I needed to do my work. So I would go back to that and say, for us to show up for people, we need to be able to show up in a way that doesn't harm ourselves and doesn't harm others. And that involves having solid boundaries. And if you've ever been affected by an addict, you'll know that addicts constantly push the boundaries of our own boundaries. They push, and the whole thing is like, well, you never did this for me, and you did, and you didn't, and did it. And I have said all of these things because I'm in recovery from addiction. And that's Addict 101. We blame other people for something that's on us. And I mean, we can get deep into family systems therapy, but basically what happens is around an addict, there are family members who take on different roles. If you ever want to Google it, it's the dopest cartoon you'll ever see. Look up Dysfunctional Family Systems cartoon, and it'll pull up, and it has this kid that's got like the ear piercing and the nose piercing, and his eyebrows are shaved, and he's wearing leather, and he's known as the bad kid. And the whole purpose of him is to take the attention off of the addict to save the family name. And then you have the studious one that gets A+. They got 4.7 GPA at Doherty Valley High School, right? They take 17 AP classes, and their father happens to be an alcoholic. And the reason they do that is to save the family name. And then you have the silent kid, the one that disappears. Nobody knows that they're even in the room. And their whole job is to silence all of the negative attention of the addict, so they're saving the family name. Then you got all these different roles that we take on, and those were fight, flight, fawn, freeze. It's all our ego trying to save the family name. And we've all got to heal from that. I'm a people pleaser, so I'm the one trying to care for every single person. That was my response to my younger trauma. So me seeing that, I've got to be able to show up in a way for other addicts that allows me to have boundaries that don't hurt me. And I don't harm other people. Because if I don't take care of myself, I lash out, I become angry, and I penalize people. And I go back to this judge environment. And whenever I put on a black robe, I realize I'm in the wrong seat. That would be kind of my answer. If we're dealing with an addict, get help. You don't have to do it alone. There's millions of people around this world that are doing it. And there's people that will sponsor you in Coda to help you to show up for other people in a healthier way.
Fantastic. I'm going to pivot us to audience questions, unless you have any wisdom you want to drop real quick, or you want to hold any, and we'll go to them. All right. I'm going to maybe be the microphone. I'm going to see if we can hear you, and if not, then I'll come to you with this microphone. But is there a question for Aaron?
Tony, that's a very powerful question. Tony says, how do we actually get into this? Because we've been talking a lot, but like, where's the thing? Like, where's the thing that you do? We might have missed opportunities. We might have already caused the damage. We might have gone too far. I'll tell you, if I can answer that question from my own belief, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it as a licensed clinical social worker. Oh. I firmly believe we've never gone too far. If you go back to that circle of compassion, imagine that circle of compassion, and imagine it's so big that no one is outside. Even you, even me, Tony. Even the person who's done the thing that is most grotesque in your mind, they're not outside the circle. Imagine the circle that big, first of all. Second of all, I'll tell you a quick story. So my 3 kids, I managed my children when they were coming up because I worked with youth that were system involved. So I knew I'm going to make my kids not system involved. And I'm going to do that by restricting all of their actions. I'm going to teach them what to think. I'm going to teach them all the things to do. I'm going to make sure they know how to act and make sure da-da-da-da. And one time my daughter, she turned 15, she no longer wanted to be in the room with me. And I'm a very deep family person. That was the hardest time, one of the hardest times in my life. I've been through very deep loss, but my daughter not wanting to be around me was literally unbelievable to me. I could not understand that. It's my first daughter. She said to me, "You're treating me like one of your youth." I'm getting sweaty right now. Why did it just get hot? Can you turn the heater down? Woo. She's 24 now, so this was 9 years ago. Thank God. A mentor here actually took me off to the side and said, "Hey, you're going to lose your daughter if you don't change." She's like, "I love you." And I was offended. I'm like, "You don't know nothing about parenting a daughter. You've only got a son." Addict 101, right? I'm going to be like you, and you don't know. And that's what you do when you have no words to say. You just make noises. Woo, man. I had to pause and I had to stop and I had to realize I was forcing my daughter to hate me. You know what my daughter needed? She needed somebody to support her. She needed somebody to hear her. She needed somebody to just be in a room with her. I had already taught her all the things, right? She already knew how to think and what to think. I needed to just back off and be a support, right? So I'll say this, it's never too late. Number 1, believe that. Number 2, my relationship with my daughter and anyone who knows my daughters, I have 2 daughters and a son. If you knew my children, if you knew my relationship, you'd be like, wow, that is wild. It is eerie how rich it is. Look at my wife, she's smiling. I'm not lying to you. Yeah. We literally just took my 21-year-old daughter to the club together. She has to go with me. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
But my daughter, like I'll say, my daughter just left for school this morning and she was turning around to leave and she stopped and came back and she wanted to hug me before she left the house. That's not a testament to me. It's proof that it's never too late. This is the same daughter that couldn't be in the same room with me. She hated being around me. But she didn't hate being around me. It's not that she didn't want it. I was making her feel inadequate as a father.
Good.
I had to change. I needed to say, I just love you for who you are, not what you do. I don't love you for your GPA. I don't love you for the things you accomplish. I just love just you. Be who you want to be. And I'll say the answer is acceptance. Remember what I said in the beginning, the first question? What do we all want from our parents? What do we want from authority figures? What do we want from our boss, our coworker? We want acceptance. So how to do the work? Bottom line, accept people. Just accept them. And then the question pops in, but what if they're doing something wrong? Accept them. Accept them. Because anything outside of acceptance is our own ego disconnecting us from other people. Now, work-wise, how do you actually do the work?
Oof. I think you are starting it because you're in the room, right? And so that already acknowledges there's something more for me to learn. And so that opens the world to things. What I do want to piggyback, I think, yes, one, there is that acceptance, but there is also that connection.
Yeah.
And once you have both of those things with somebody that you care about or don't care about, you just met them, but you feel like, hey, they're doing something wrong. I need to imprint in their world. You can't do that to ears that will hear you unless you first offer them acceptance and connection. And once you've done that, then you may still think that they're doing something wrong. And is that your ego or because you're afraid that they're going to be hurt or hurt somebody else? And that's when you need to figure out, where do I step in or do I just step to the side? Because it's not maybe your place to be putting yourself on that individual. So acceptance and connection, and then really looking, is this something harmful or can it just be? And we share space together until they're ready to say, I don't really like what's going on. What would you do in this situation? And now you're bridged and you can start doing some work there. But also going back to that healing piece, there's real work that needs to be done on our own selves. We've all, unless we were somewhere in a bubble and exposed to no one ever, we have had harm, we have had hurts. Everyone of us have had some sort of experience. Sometimes they feel like, oh, yours is way bigger, so I'm not going to give any truth or validation to my own, because there's always somebody worse than me, right? And by doing that, we have denied our own inner child, our inner wound of what happened to us, and it is real, and it deserves to be hugged and given the love that it does, and honored, right? And we need to give ourselves permission to do that so that we can show up for others who have also experienced either the same thing, worse things, less things, but we can't show up our full selves unless we have loved that inner child that deserves to be cared for in a way that just wasn't, not for anybody's fault, right? Our parents, I believe, whether good or bad, they did the best that they could with the information that they had at the time that they were doing it. They may grow from that and they may come back and apologize for what they've done. But at the time, they were doing the best that they could possibly do with their own baggage of hurts and harm and damage. And that's just all that we're all kind of just trucking through on. So I think if we all see ourselves as hurt, damaged individuals instead of the us versus them, we can start doing some major healing in this world.
That's it. You sparked a couple things. I'll just add to that. One is, so my sponsor, he would be okay with me saying this. He does not believe in God of the Bible, right? But he came to me and he explained to me his definition of God. And he said that he believes that God is love. So that's in the Bible. And I taught him that as time came over. And he's like, no, but I believe that my God is love. And I'm like, wow, that's wild. That's what it's supposed to be. But his experience was not love when it comes to God. And that was not God's fault. That was our fault. Because hurt people. But then healed people get to heal people. Right? And so I'll say, as a grandpa, if you were my grandpa, all I would want to hear you to tell me is just how much you love me for just who I am. If you're my dad, if you're my coworker, if you're whoever you are to me, you're significant to me, and all I need is to know that you accept me And the other definition that I heard just recently in a recovery book is that all love is connection. So literally, like, just connect with people. Just connect with people. Sit down, have a meal for no purpose, just to meal with them, just to break a bread, just to eat, just to drink together, just to have good time together. We're just going to sit together. I'm going to give you the greatest gift that I can give you is undivided attention. I had to remind myself this morning. I started jumping on my phone. My wife was still there. I put it down and I rolled over. And we had 4 minutes, right? Undivided attention. It was powerful for me. All I needed was connection. I feel more comfortable today because I had those 4 extra minutes where we're with each other, right? The greatest gift we can give people is connection, undivided attention, so we can show up for people. That's a very practical thing. And I know it might sound foo-foo. It is not, I promise you. I can walk up to people. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a gift. I don't know. But I can walk up to people that other people are afraid of, and I can connect with them. I don't think I'm special. I can also disconnect with people very quickly if I'm not in a good spot. I've gotten into very dangerous situations that I caused myself to get into. And I had to back up, be like, let me take a deep breath. Let me try this again. I'm sorry that I approached you that way. Let me try it again. Let me just connect with you as a person. I might be misunderstanding this.
I'm sorry goes a very long way. I think it's something that people hold back because we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to expose ourselves. We want to look or be in control, whatever your addiction is. Mine is control and stubbornness, I think, are both of my strengths, if I could say so. But I'm sorry is such a great way to just bridge with somebody. And you can watch people just simmer in themselves if you just say, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean for it to come out that way. I really didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. I myself was in a meeting for AA just the other day. I'm also in recovery. And a lady was telling her story, and she was talking about her brain was in files, so she was all over the place. And she was doing a lot of and then she's telling about her future, but then she went to her past, and then she goes, and then every time I try to talk, there's this woman that sits next to me, and she's just doing this. And I was like, ooh, that's me. I've also done that to you all night. Yes, go. So after the talk, I was like, hey, I'm really sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable today. I really wanted to be encouraging in that moment for you and to tell you, yes, keep talking, girl, you've got this. And she's like, no, I loved it. And I was like, okay, so that's not how this conversation was going. And I was like, okay, well, I just want to really just acknowledge that I appreciated your story. I wanted to hear more of it. And I'm sorry if at any point in that time I made you feel uncomfortable. So immediately we have that connection and a moment shared together. I left with her phone number, so winning. But she wanted to have that connection move forward in a way that wasn't going to happen, even if I hadn't maybe made her feel uncomfortable and then had to move forward in it. So I would encourage you to just do it, whatever you're feeling inside. And if it works, keep going with it. And if they're looking uncomfortable or aggravated, apologize and try something different. Mm-hmm. It's okay.
Yep. Were there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Talking about that, for new people that have never done it, what type of resources or anything out there that
The question is, for people that have never done this before, and we want to get into this, how do we get connected to someone so we don't mess it up? And do you mean specifically like doing your own inner healing or doing work outreaching to the unhoused?
Outreach.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So the answer I would give, definitely there's organizations that you could jump in with. There's this one located at 16 something Friesman Road. It's right here in Goodness Village. They have an opportunity for you to volunteer. They actually have like a whole network where you can jump in. Oh, right here, our volunteer coordinator in the back of the room.
Hey, there she is.
See her. Look, she just happens to be conveniently located. If you want to check us out, First Pres Hayward, come check us out. City Serve in the Tri-Valley does some work, and that you can actually jump in various different ways. They have ambassador opportunities where they'll train you. There's all kinds of ways to jump in. I think it depends on, like, first of all, I would say, like, which is the population I'm feeling connected to the most, and then who's the local organization that provides opportunities for you to do that. If you want to talk with me personally, I'd love to give you some answers to that. If you're looking for a specific population, there's a lot of organizations that just plug people in and train them. If it's unhoused, those are the three that I would probably co-sign for, that are willing to take in volunteers. And the good thing is they do it in a way that there's good boundaries. So, like, coming here to Goodness Village, it's not going to be like, okay, we need you 7 nights a week from midnight to 8 a.m., blah, blah, blah. Although they do need that.
What?
But there's a way to jump in and say, like, for example, we have folks at our spot that we have some elderly folks that are members of the church, and they come in once a month and run a laundry day. So they just do laundry at the shelter for people that aren't able to do their own laundry. So they just run in laundry. It's a pretty simple thing, a way to connect. I got, another person who comes and sits in our recovery circle that's a therapist, and she's willing to meet with people after. I mean, there's ways to get in where you can fit in. I know there's even folks here that will drive to go get groceries. There's ways to connect. So I would honestly, the first thing I would do is connect with an agency who's doing something similar to what you already want to do.
Yeah, and I would go back to healed people heal people.
That's
So
right.
Before, you might want to do a little inner inventory of where you're at and what is your reasoning, your motivation for serving within the community, and make sure that your ego is in a good place before you possibly come out and maybe do harm in that space. And one of the things that I have my private practice clients do when we're doing work on our healing is find a picture of yourself as young as you can find, and just kind of take some time looking at that person and remembering that child and kind of speaking life into that child that deserves it. Do it in a safe place. Make sure you have, self-care around that. But I think doing that also then takes that moment to remember that every single one of us were children at some particular time, and the things that happened to us as children is what created us as adults. So if I see somebody who's having a bad day, who might be escalated and behaving in a certain way, I can typically go, ooh, they probably had a really rough something during their childhood, and my attitude towards the way that they're approaching me shifts because they're functioning right now in their coping mechanism, and it's not about me, it's about them feeling unsafe, and they're trying to work on protecting that inner child themselves. So take a look at yourself as a kiddo, love on yourself a bit, and then remember that we're all just kind of wounded kids out here trying to fumble through the world.
Amen to all that. Were there any more questions? Okay, I got a nugget for you. Here's some car ride questions. When we talk about how do we specifically do this, so one of the things that is difficult is to kind of get outside of yourself. So you got to ask yourself some challenging questions. I would say one question to ask yourself, maybe the person you rode here with or somebody you trust. Who can I speak with this week that I currently don't understand? I saw some looks. Who can I speak with that I don't understand? With the purpose, remember, if kinship was the goal, we wouldn't be fighting for justice. We would be celebrating it. So the goal is kinship. With kinship in mind, who can I speak with that I don't understand? Next level, who can I begin to understand that I currently disagree with? I'm feeling some feelings from the crowd right now. I love it.
They all wanted to leave 5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
They said, ooh, I didn't want to stay for these questions.
Yeah.
There's homework.
I didn't say agree with them. Remember, it's very key with the words here. Who can I begin to understand that I don't agree with? I don't need to agree with them. I just need to understand their point of view. This is a whole practice. It's not simple, but it is at the same time. We just have to lay down our judgments, and you need to get curious. And none of these questions begin with a W. Okay? This is a key. If you say why, what, when, who, you're going to set people off. Don't start with W's. Maybe start with like an H, like, how did you come to understand things the way you understand them? What were you thinking? That doesn't work. Why are you so stupid? That one doesn't help. But if you could start with like a how did you come to this understanding? Could you give me more information about why you believe the things you believe? What is the reason that allows you to believe those things? So I would be careful with the W's. I would start with the H's. That'd be helpful, okay? And then we did talk about shadow work. I know we've dipped into that quite a bit. This got a little bit deeper into that than I thought we were going to get, which is shout out to our LCSW. Self-parenting. I like how that came out real quick. But I think if we really believe, if we can hold on to that thing and say healing, like the best thing I can do for my family, the best thing I can do for my organization, the best thing I can do for my community, and that can be as big as whatever you define that is for me to heal myself. If I can work on healing myself, then I can show up better for other people because I won't be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I'll just be present. And then I can connect with people, and then I can accept people, ultimately. I think that's my nuggets for today.
I think that's amazing. All right, last opportunity I'm going to give you for questions. You can also attack him after we put down the microphones. But if you have something pressing before we send him off with a big round of applause, then thanks for coming out from Hayward. We're good? All right. Thank you so much, Aaron.